Hi everyone. Today I'd like to talk with you all about the term rhetorical dexterity. This term, coined by teacher and scholar Shannon Carter, is a way to describe one of the central skills that this class is supposed to teach. To understand rhetorical dexterity, let's first break it down and look at each word in the term. First, rhetoric. Rhetoric is the art of writing or speaking persuasively. In other words, writing or speaking in a way that convinces others of a thought, idea, or argument. Now, those others in the previous sentence and how you think of them is more important than it might seem. The concept of rhetoric is deeply tied to audience, for if we can't gain any trust from our audience, we cannot convince them of much. In speech and in writing, that trust is often gained in subtle and nuanced ways. In speech, it's conveyed by the way we speak, the inflection of our voice, the words we choose to use, the slang, and metaphors we employ. And in writing, we're always conveying a secondary meaning besides our argument, with our word choices, sentence structures, use of evidence, and tone. David Foster Wallace puts it this way, quote, "Every sentence blends and balances at least two different communicative functions. One, the transmission of raw info. The other, the transmission of certain stuff about the speaker." Unquote. The ability to write in a way that relates our message with clarity and persuasiveness to our audience while building credibility with that audience is the essence of what is called rhetoric. Now, dexterity. The Oxford American Dictionary defines dexterity as skill in using your hands or your mind. So, we'd say a basketball player with good ball handling skills is dexterous. They're able to handle a lot of different situations. The same goes for someone who is rhetorically dexterous. That person can handle a number of different rhetorical situations. In other words, that person can convey arguments clearly and persuasively to a large number of different groups. If you find yourself able to convince your friends of ideas, but less able to write a paper to convince others of those same ideas, what you'll develop in order to improve that skill is your rhetorical dexterity. Shannon Carter's own definition of rhetorical dexterity goes as follows, quote, "The ability to effectively read, understand, manipulate, and negotiate the cultural and linguistic codes of a new community based on a relatively accurate assessment of another, more familiar one." Unquote. In other words, it's the ability to use effective communication skills and methods developed in one community to communicate to another community. David Foster Wallace, whom I mentioned before, in a discussion on this concept in an essay called Authority and American Usage, gives the following example using elementary school children. Quote, "The point is that the little A-plus snootlet," and this is the phrase Wallace gives for the elementary school child who speaks and writes kind of proper English. So the point is that that kid is actually in the same dialectal position as the class's quote-unquote slow kid who can't learn to stop using ain't or bringed. Exactly the same position. One is punished in class, the other on the playground. In other words, one kid does poorly in school and the other one does poorly socially on the playground, right? But both are deficient in the same linguistic skill. The ability to move between various dialects and levels of quote-unquote correctness. The ability to communicate one way with peers and another way with teachers and another with family and another with t-ball coaches and so on, unquote. In other words, a kid with a greater level of rhetorical dexterity will be able to move among these different audiences and know how to craft a message that will convey not only the message, but also that they belong to the group. Think about how this relates to the concept of cultural capital that we worked on last week. The ability to write to a group in a way that shows that you're quote-unquote in gives you some cultural capital to work with within that group. So one thing I'd like you to be hyper aware of going forward is the language moves associated with writing that happens in college. Now, that differs from group to group within the university, and depending on your major, you'll have to learn some specific conventions. The expectations are different for science papers as for history papers, for example. but we'll be focusing on the ways in which we can hone the languages we use in our normal lives to work and offer you some cultural capital in academic environments. They Say, I Say is an excellent resource for learning those moves, which is why we'll be using it extensively. So, I hope you have a better sense of the term rhetorical dexterity, how it relates to cultural capital, and why it's important to your success here and beyond. Thank you.